Okay, so it seems like we were just in Mexico yesterday, but we no longer are because it is raining here. Oh well. First of all, we'd just like to thank you for the support that you gave to us. First of all, financially, we couldn't do the trip without all of you. Secondly, the gifts that we were given to give to the kids, they appreciated them so much. And thirdly, your prayers were appreciated. The fact that we can go all the way down to Mexico and we are still all in one piece. We have all our fingers and toes. It was a very successful trip and we were healthy, and we just want to thank you for your prayers. We could not have done it without all of you. So every year the Mexico trip looks very different. So this year, no surprise, we went to some new places, which we had no idea what to expect, but we are greatly encouraged by the places that we went. We did stop at Pastor Christopher. So if we go back, our theme for this year that we kind of gave to the team was in Isaiah. It says, whom shall I send as a messenger to this people? Who will go for us? And he says, here I am, send me. And that's kind of the theme we wanted. What were we going to do? We didn't know exactly, but we simply wanted the hearts of send us, let us serve in whatever capacity that looks like. So we did go to Ensenada. We did see Pastor Christopher, and we were able to drop off actually one of our soundboards, and he was very excited to see that. Unfortunately, with how everything worked out, we couldn't actually do any ministry there this year, but the ministry there is flourishing. The buildings, they're expanding on the church more and more. Every time we go, it just seems bigger and bigger, which is exciting. Not only are they at the site that we have previously worked on, but they have a women's rehab center at a different site. And Pastor Chris continues to have vision to see what else he can do in Mexico and in Ensenada. And so, that's us with Pastor Christopher. He's the Mexican guy. We're all not, as you can tell. But he was excited to see us, and we were excited to see him. So then we went through Ensenada. We stopped there, picked up all our food and supplies and piñatas and everything we needed, and we went to the town of Colonet. And so how we got linked up with this is Chad and Nicole Furlong. Chad has come here with a team called 12, but through God and a miracle, him and his wife were able to adopt a beautiful baby girl who was Mexican. And the Mexican government actually doesn't allow adoptions outside of their country. So the fact that these people were able to have a Mexican child adopted is a miracle from God. And so this happened, and Chad and Nicole thought it was very important that they continue a relationship with the family. They didn't just want to, bring the kid to the United States where they live and cut off communication. They wanted to continue the relationship with the family. And it's been a very positive relationship, and the family is the one, they still live in Colonet. And they wanted to thank Chad and Nicole, so they said, we want to give you a piece of land, which is a pretty big deal because this family does not, they're not rich or anything. They say, we want to give you a piece of land as a thank you. And we simply have one rule for what you do with the land. They said, we want you to do something good. That's pretty vague. So Chad and Nicole began to have a call, They were called to do something good with the property. So they had been going to Colonet for a while, and they began to see, and so this is the property they have. It's dirt. There's a lot of dirt there, simply dirt. So what were they going to do with it? And they saw this need in Colonet. The people, a lot of the time, they're workers in the fields. And when you're a worker in the field, you're getting paid about $5 a day. Recently, they fought to try and get $6 a day. They lost. They still get $5 a day. And so they're not getting a lot of money. And some of these are single-parent homes, with just the mom. But they can't afford to have daycare. There isn't daycare, like a free daycare there or anything. And they can't afford to not work. So kids as young as 2, and they were telling us even stories, babies being left at home, not because the parents don't love them, but because they need to feed these kids. They need to do something for these kids. And so Chad saw this, and it broke his heart, as it would break any of our hearts, and he thought, we need to do something about this. And so his dream now for this is to build a daycare, and I'll explain that a little more. We also met Pastor Rafa. This is Pastor Rafa. He was at the church that we stayed at. He was a really cool guy. He had crazy stories. But he was a missionary, actually, serving while the pastor was gone. And his hope, kind of linked with Chad's, is he wants to, these people working in the fields and everything, he wants to help them. He wants to serve with them. And so the vision began for a daycare center, and for a free daycare center, so that these kids aren't left at home anymore, but instead the parents will volunteer maybe once a month or something, and the Mexican people can run this daycare, and the kids won't be left at home. It'll be safe. And so this is Chad's vision. Instead of an orphanage, although orphanages are totally great, a lot of the reason why some kids get into the orphanages are because of this, right? The parents can't take care of them because they don't have that daycare for them. So hoping to keep the families intact. So we became part of this vision, which was really cool. So what they have been doing is, right now they're building cabins so that teams, when we come down, we can stay there and we can help. So you'll see the finished cabin, but so we built a bunch. Jeff Nordenboss was kind of the one who knew what he was doing, and we all just followed his lead. I just watched a lot. No, I tried to help. But if you go to the next slide, we were building a trench. He didn't think we'd get it done. We got it done. We were able to stain and paint some things that he needed done. We worked really hard. And there are these kids that, again, the parents aren't there. And the guys, they stayed at some of the cabins. And every morning they got woken up by a couple of these little boys that just wanted to hang out with us. And so you see one of the kids painting with us, because we got to actually work alongside these people. And it was really, really cool. They didn't know what we were saying sometimes. We didn't know what they were saying. But there's just this language, like, you can still speak in love. And so, yeah, it was really cool. And Chad has integrated himself into the town of Colonet. So whenever he's there, these boys find him, and they hang out with him. And the people know him because they see that he wants to be a change for them. He wants to help them and to help those kids. And so us being there, we were so welcomed in. We actually were invited, so with Chad's adopted daughter, we were able to have a meal with the grandma. And man, these were delicious. They were 3 huge tacos. Like, they weren't like, oh, let's just feed you a little. They stuffed us full. But they allowed us to be part of this vision for a little bit, and it was amazing. So what we'd do is, in the morning, we'd wake up, we'd work hard. Well, some of us would work hard. I would be the foreman and tell them what to do. But no, we'd work hard and then eat lunch. And right, the kids are with us when they're waking up. They're helping us out. We eat lunch. They're there. We go to our VBS next. They're there again. So we're doing crafts. They're playing Ring Around the Rosie. We did some songs. We fed the kids because some of them, right, wouldn't get lunches otherwise. So we fed the kids. And then after we would do this, right, tell stories, but you see the kids eating with us. We had a piñata. But then after this, they would come back to the church with us. And they would hang out with us still. And we were there with them till sometimes 11 p.m. They were still with us. And so this year, more than ever, I was talking with a couple of team members who have been on the trip before, and they were saying, the fact that we got to spend so much time with the kids, it felt like we actually made these deep, deep relationships. Like every day they were excited to see us. They knew us. You were seeing the exact same kids. They were at the church and everything. And it was amazing at this site because we felt like, man, this is the start of something. At Pastor Christopher's, we had seen it from the ground up. And right here, we're starting to see from the ground up how Colonet is going to change. And it's exciting. And so we got to be part of that change this year. So there are actually 2 missionaries that had also been at that site. And when we first met them, they were feeling very discouraged in their ministry, actually. The one pastor, Rafa, had said, they just have this spirit that they're pretty down right now. So the next place we went, which was totally not expected, this was not part of our plan, but again, God works through things. And that's the cabin finished. It's pretty sweet. We tried for red, like Canada red, but they didn't have, in Mexico, like whatever color they have is what color they have. So it's a cool orange, yellowy thingy. I don't know. I'm not good with colors, but that's our team in front of it. That's what it looked like at the end. But we went to Camalou, which is, it's not that far away, maybe 15 minutes. And that's where these 2 missionaries were. And they had asked us, can you do VBS for us? And so we didn't really have the supplies, but we figured out the supplies because it's in Mexico, Flexico, Mexico. You just work with it. So we went to this place called Camalou. And there's these 2 people, Daniel and Perla. They're beginning a ministry, and they are actually both from Ensenada. Daniel was in dentistry and stuff like that, and he just felt, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be serving in Mexico. So we actually see people being missionaries right there, finding that call. So they're beginning this ministry, and they ask, can you do a VBS? And we're like, sure, why not? So a couple of our team, while other people were building, we went and we did a VBS. And even comparing it to Colonet was way different. When we got there, now usually when we get to the church, they're pretty open, right? Like welcoming everyone in. This area is a little different. When we got there, there was a locked gate. All around there was kind of a protected place around the church. And we could tell it's a little bit of a rougher area than we were used to. So we got there and we did a VBS with them, and we hung out with them, and we did a piñata with them. And these tough street kids who, I've never seen kids like so willing to push and shove each other in Mexico, but they were rough kids. You could tell they had to fight for whatever they were going to get. So they have this vision now. These 2 have now ran a Saturday morning feeding program. So every Saturday, they are finding a way to get food to these kids who wouldn't regularly get food. And they're doing, teaching them the Bible and things like that. Their hope was if we came on the Saturday and did the feeding program and got a piñata with them, then the kids would come to church on Sunday. It totally worked, just so you know. Bribery does even work in Mexico too. No, the kids are excited. And actually on the Sunday morning we got there, thinking the kids would think, whatever. They were waiting. When they saw our van, they all rushed to it, and they were waiting for us to get outside of it. And it showed us we made a difference in, 2 hours, 3 hours of playing with them. These tough kids were warming up to us. These tough kids who they didn't care, whatever, were hugging us, were hanging out with us, were wanting to take pictures with us. We saw the change within 2 hours. And so they have a vision for these kids' lives. And those 2 missionaries that we saw at first were really discouraged. We've seen this rejuvenation in their spirits, and they're excited, and they're thinking, what should we do next? And if you see one of these kids, top right, they're holding a picture. So the first day that we went there, we took a picture with everyone. And in Mexico, especially with these kids, in some of the poorer areas, they don't get pictures. They don't have pictures of themselves. That would be totally weird idea to them. So we actually have a mini printer and we printed out pictures for each of them. And so the kids got to take the photos and say, oh, there's me, there's you. It was a pretty cool experience. And so these two are trying to change Kamloops by changing the young people, right? Change begins when a generation can change. And so that's the picture that we got to give them. And those are all the kids, and they were very hyper and excited, but they were so fun to play with. And Daniel and Perla are becoming part of that town. And some people ask sometimes, why do we do short-term missions trips? They can't really change anything. You know, I think previously, before going on the missions trip, sometimes I would think that. But as we partnered alongside these missionaries, Rafa and Chad and Daniel and Perla, we saw change, and we saw that within them, they were encouraged. And so if you go to the next slide, we gave them balls. So they got to give the soccer balls that have the message of the gospel in Spanish. Don't worry, it's not in English. That would be confusing for them. It's in Spanish so they can read, and we gave them shoes. And they were excited because they could give these kids something that could say, hey, we love you. And because we got to spend all day with kids at Colonet, the kids felt like, yeah, they do love us. They do care about us. And they'd ask, are we going to see you tomorrow? On the last day, it was the toughest thing to say, no, you won't. But I believe we did make a big difference. And since visiting Kamloops, they are doing lots of work. They are excited. What can we do next? So that they have water now in their ministry, and they're continuing to dream. What will it look like, as they would say, when you guys come back next year? Of course, they want us back, and it's awesome to see their vision is continuing. So yeah, we got to be a part of these ministries, and it was an exciting time. And again, we could just send money, and that would be great, and they would love that. But us being there, they told us that made all the difference. And so that was encouraging for us. And this is on the last night. That's with Chad. He has the shirt, Living the Dream. And there's one of the girls who was there till 11 p.m. the one night, just hanging out with us, trying to figure out what we were saying, us trying to figure out what she was saying. And it's exciting to see the difference that we could make, even within a couple days.
So I'm going to continue our trip down the road, which means we go another 15 miles or so south from Kamloops to the next town, which was Vicente Guerrero. There's actually literally only one main highway that runs down the Baja coast, and all these little towns are situated along the one main highway. Ensenada is the first big city, and then the towns start getting much smaller. You have to cross a few mountain ranges and whatnot, and so then the towns become much smaller, and the terrain changes a little bit, and it becomes very occupied by, in their terms, rich landowners. And they have huge fields of strawberry fields, tomato fields, cucumber fields, all these different agricultural produce items that we buy in our grocery stores that are marked on those boxes, product of Mexico. That's where they come from, is that part of the Baja coast. And I mean, I buy the strawberries, and it's one of those things, it's a moral dilemma that you have to face. Do I support this or not? We do, because we want those people to have work. The fact that they actually strike this spring, they were on strike to get $6 instead of $5, and it was turned down, and they actually fought for that so hard, which is unusual for these people because they're so underprivileged. That was a big blow to them. And, it's hard to see them making so little, but we still need to buy the strawberries and we still need to buy the tomatoes because we want them to have work. So on we go to the orphanage. And the orphanage is a place that we have ministered. We've been 3 times now. This was our 3rd trip, and it was really neat because actually some of the kids remembered different people on our team, and so did some of the full-time missionaries that were there. They remembered us as well. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, they remembered us. We discovered it was a huge blessing to them to have us come, which you don't always hear that from the missionaries that are there, but they told us that when they hear stories of how our lives are blessed by being there, it's the fuel that keeps them going. They need that. They get discouraged doing the same thing day in and day out, and just caring for people that are constantly needing care. It's discouraging sometimes, and many of them are 100% volunteer. They've left their jobs, or they're retired couples, or whatever it might be, from Canada and the U.S. that have gone down there full-time serving, and some of them have been there 20 years. And they're just like loving the people and loving God and wanting to make a difference, and they are making a difference. But when teams come and rally with them and show them that, there's people back in Canada that love you and pray for you, and we're here to support you, it is the fuel to keep them going. And that's really nice for us to know too, that we're more than just a distraction to them. Some highlights from our time at the orphanage this year. The youth group here at Calvary Temple has been sponsoring one of the children from the orphanage for the last couple years, Angelica. And the team got to meet her this year. And she got to meet us, and that was a really big blessing. Tyler and Peter were able to work again with a man who runs the IT department at the orphanage, and he remembered that the work that they had done 4 years past, and was so blessed to be able to bounce ideas off of them. And as you can see, the orphanage is not a small place. This is just one conglomeration of buildings. There are several more. It's actually a very large orphanage. They have about 90 plus children in their care. And as well as they have a school, they also have a free daycare center, they have a learning center for disabled, and all these different things. And they're trying to stay, up with the times, modern technology, and so they're trying their best to run cables, and it's very archaic to the systems that we would run here, but they're doing their best. And so Peter and Tyler, 2 guys from our team who have a lot of computer IT experience, have been able to bless them abundantly in our time down there, just in a matter of a few days. Not necessarily even doing the work, but giving them ideas of how to get it done. And that's been such a huge blessing to them. We're so thankful for that. We had the opportunity to go and serve at the Men's Rehab Center again this year. And this center has been in operation for the past 11 years. It is part of the orphanage ministry, but it's on a completely different location. It's probably about 20 minutes away. And the man who runs the center, his name is Hans Benning, and that's him up there in the corner with his wife. And he is a violin maker. He's kind of famous, actually. You can go online and see Benning's violins, and he sells them for $30,000 and $40,000. And yeah, he's quite amazing. But in his retirement years, this is what he chose to do with his life. He started this rehab center from nothing, from a patch of dirt, and it is quite the amazing facility right now. And it's just so incredible being there and serving with him. And we went to serve for one morning and came back, our heads just reeling and so full of new hope, He says this over and over and over again, and I'm sure the guys at the center must get tired of hearing it, but he says, never give up on anyone. Never stop praying for them. No matter what their life is like, no matter what they're going through, never give up on anyone. And if he was here this morning, I'd tell you that's the message he would say to you. Doesn't matter who you know and what they're going through and how difficult life is for them, never give up praying for anyone. God can reach into anybody's heart and make a difference. And he sees this happen over and over and over again, and it's just remarkable. He's a German man, and I'll tell you that was the cleanest, neatest place that we were anywhere in Mexico. He has that spick and span, and the guys at the center, they work hard with him every day, and they have made just an amazing facility in 11 years. It was a privilege to be there. The kids' outreaches into the community are always a highlight for us. We get to partner with missionaries who are at the orphanage, who it is their heart to go into these poorer communities right around there. And they go daily into these little communities, and we get to see firsthand the difference that they are making, not only at the orphanage, but in the whole community, in the whole region. Elizabeth is one of the missionaries that we got to go with, and she was amazing just to see her with the kids and the control that she has. And, of course, it's a wonderful blessing for her to have teams with her. And, there's 4, 5, 6 of us, I don't know, that went with her that day. And she's so happy to have us with her and helping, control the children or whatever. We leave all the ministry stuff up to her. We're just there to help. And she puts us to work doing different things. And we said to her, this must be, do you ever have to do this by yourself? Like, this must be a lot of work. And she's like, no, easy. She goes and she takes care of these communities of children by herself a lot of times, and just loves the children. And it was such a privilege to see her at work with them. And we think Ensenada is not Ensenada, Vicente, where the orphanage is, and the little communities around there. We think that's poor to our standard of understanding. And yet, her heart is, she told some of the team members of our team this year that she wants to go further south into Oaxaca, because we heard the missionaries from the orphanage say this, and it kind of blows our minds. In their understanding, we have everything. Like they're saying this from their perspective. We have everything. Down south, they have nothing. So they want to become missionaries further down into the poorer regions of Mexico. And we're just like reeling, going, wow, that's incredible. They raise their own support, their own funds, and they go on missionary trips down into Oaxaca, way further down. It's close to the Guatemalan border, and they want to do ministry in the very poor regions of Mexico. And that is her heart. And some of the team members said, well, can we support you in any way financially? Is there any way you can? No, she says. No, I just ask for your prayer. I just want your prayer. Wow. The orphanage will be celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Next year, 2016. So what has God done in 50 years through this orphanage? God's call came to a married couple by the names of Chuck and Charla Perot, I guess, a fireman and housewife from North Hollywood, California in 1966. They are the founders of the orphanage. They took an unforgettable little trip down into Mexico, 178 miles south of the San Diego border, and received a very supernatural call and vision on that trip that would not only change their lives, but would change the lives of so many others. As they were driving one night down into the countryside of Mexico, they actually lost their way. They got lost. And it was very barren at that time. There wasn't a whole lot around. The little communities were very underdeveloped, and they hadn't seen a gas station for quite a while. And now they're lost, and it's getting dark. And so they decided, instead of going further and getting into more trouble, they saw a few abandoned buildings, and they stopped there. And the vision that came was in the sound of children laughing in a place where there were no children. They literally heard children laughing, but there were no children there. And all they had there was a few old, crumbling Adobe-styled buildings, Mexican buildings. A verse from the Bible that was whispered into Charla's ear that night said, "Lo, the fields are white unto harvest." And as she looked, the sparse wild grasses around her were transformed into waving fields of grain. And she and her husband felt really sure that this was God's call on their life. And through a series of events, they were able to purchase that land, and which is 72 acres. It's a big piece of land. And that's how the first orphanage, through Foundation for His Ministry, was started. They saw needy children all around. Children came, and they still come. And here they are fed, clothed, loved, nurtured, and discipled in Christian faith. They didn't realize at the time that God had an even larger plan than what they thought or what they could see. 25 plus years after the orphanage was started, so about 1980, the whole Baja area was now starting to become an agricultural hotspot for things like, it started with tomatoes. And they were bringing these poor, very poor native Indian people from the state of Oaxaca up to this area. And they're bringing them by the busloads and putting them in work camps and getting them to work in their fields for very, very low wages. And since 1980, the agricultural industry in this area has grown tremendously, and so has the population of these very poor field workers, still being brought up from the state of Oaxaca. At about the same time that this influx of poor happened in this region, God also began to send missionaries to the orphanage to help care for the children at the orphanage and to distribute food and clothing to the destitute field workers. These people responded to the claims of the gospel as well because they had never heard the gospel of Jesus. When the need is great, God has a great dream to impart to us, His people, who are willing to dream with Him. There has been so many unsung heroes of the faith that have served at the orphanage over the years and have dreamed a dream of a better life for the poor and the destitute of that region. God has been faithful to His word and fulfilled so many of their dreams over the years. Everything is definitely not perfect there today. In fact, there's still a huge need in that region. But there have been significant miracles of dreams coming to pass with God's inspiration and guidance. By 2011, the Baja mission had grown to include all of these ministries and actually many more than what you see on the screen. There's so many things that they are able to do through this mission now. It's very large, and they've made a huge impact in this whole community. In our visits to the orphanage, we've heard many stories of how this ministry and that ministry sort of were started. We've been blessed to meet some of the faithful laborers who were used by God to do extraordinary things. I could tell you stories regarding so many of these ministries, but I don't have time this morning, obviously. So I just want to share one. I'll tell you the story of how God sees things from a different perspective. And I really hope I get through this without crying, because this was hard. Oh boy. This couple is Dirk and Mary Koss, and they started the Learning Center for the Disabled. Oh boy, I'm not going to be able to share this. Sorry. It was probably the most touching moment for me. Every morning, Dirk and Mary are a Dutch couple who immigrated from Holland to Canada in 1981, I believe. And he works with bikes. He's a professional bike mechanic, and he makes bikes and he fixes bikes. And he's done this his whole life in Holland as well. And 8 years ago, I guess, 10 years ago, somewhere around there, maybe 10 years ago, he was asked by his church in Edmonton, where they were living, if he would drive the bus down to the orphanage because they were taking a group of young people on a missions trip. And they asked, would you be willing to be our bus driver? Because they knew he was a bus driver as well. And he agreed to do that. And in his words, he said, -40 in Edmonton or +20 in Mexico. Okay, I'll go. And so he went. And he said it was a wonderful experience. It was his first time being at an orphanage like this, and it was just such a huge blessing. His wife works with disabled children been working with disabled children in Edmonton for years already, and so that was a big part of their lives already. And he discovered something when he was there. He saw a child in a wheelchair at the orphanage trying to get over the bumpy, dirty terrain there with a normal wheelchair wheel, and it just wasn't working for them. So he thought, if I put bike tires on this wheelchair, I bet you they're going to roll easier. And sure enough, he adapted a wheelchair while he was there, gave it to the child to use, and it did work much better. So he started doing that. He started bringing down, he went a year later and he took a whole bunch of bike tires down with him, and he started reconstructing wheelchairs. And they didn't really have a disabled ministry happening at the time, but it happened over the course of the next couple years. Because what he realized is disabled children in Mexico, in this part of Mexico, they are left on their own, very often actually left in cages in their house, in their wherever they live, by their parents, because their parents go and work in the fields and they have nothing to do with them. Their school systems won't accept them because they don't have the funding for them. So they're literally left on their own, and many die in cages, left in their homes. And so he just thought, this is unacceptable. Thank God that people get that, right? It's unacceptable. And he said, we have to be able to do something to change this. And so he started, through the orphanage, a center. He calls it the Learning Center, and it's for disabled children up to the age of 20, I believe. They're allowed to stay there. And he goes on a bus. He's retired. Him and his wife moved down to Mexico full-time 8 years ago when he retired, and he runs a bus. I got to ride with him at 6:30 in the morning and go and pick up all these children, and some of them are in wheelchairs, some of them are walking, and Down syndrome and all different things, and they come on the bus and they're just happy and smiling, and they can't wait to get to the center, and in the morning at the orphanage, we always start with church. It's called Sala after breakfast. And I discovered that day that I went with them that they have their own sala. They have their own church first thing in the morning when they get into their classroom, and they have wonderful teachers that are there, missionaries working with them day in and day out. And I watched as they set up for their own little church service. And their worship team was made up of one guy who was in a wheelchair who had no feet. I don't know what happened to him, but he rolled his wheelchair up to the piano, and he was their piano player. And there was another, the two singers, one was Down syndrome, and one, I don't know what all of their disabilities were, but all of these disabled children, they were their worship team. And they started singing and playing the same songs, like "Here We Are to Worship," those kinds of songs, the same songs that I knew. So I knew the tune, and I listened to them sing, and I could not even look around. I was going to do like the ugliest cry ever if I looked around. It was just so incredibly beautiful and heart-wrenching, and just so gorgeous to see what society there even they can't find a way to make it work for these children. It's not that they see them as useless, but they don't know what to do with them in their society. And God, in his love and mercy and compassion, saw this wonderful couple and said, I've got a plan for you after retirement, and I know exactly how to make it happen. And there they are running this learning center now, and it's just the most beautiful, beautiful place in the world. And when I had the privilege of being in that worship service with these wonderful children who were all really cast outs from society and would never be able to have anything like this any other way, to see them, coming out of non-Christian homes, around this circle, raising their hands and worshiping as they had their church service that morning, it was absolutely probably the most beautiful worship service I've ever been able to be a part of. It was so incredibly gorgeous. So I just enjoyed learning about that ministry this year and seeing a part of what God is doing. These missionaries are ordinary people, tradespeople, people with professions, people with neither a trade nor profession, people who have just heard a call from God, went and saw the need and allowed God to give them dreams of a better world for these desperately poor people. These missionaries are ordinary people who didn't know that they could necessarily be the change that was needed, but they partnered with God and they saw the miracles happen and they saw the miracles come. This year I have to tell you that God did something wonderful for me and some of the other members on our team as well. Some of us have been and saw the huge need in the surrounding communities in the past, and with regards to poverty and the continual oppression of low wages and unsafe working conditions and really deplorable living conditions, we felt, like I have, and I know some others have, felt a sense of hopelessness for these people. It was a very heavy burden. And a burden that sat in my heart since 2011 when we were first introduced to this region. And this year we thought we were simply partnering with Chad and the dream that God had given him for Natalie's hometown, and it soon became much more than that. This town, Colonet, is a half an hour away from the orphanage and right in the middle of all the agricultural industry of this region. There are many work camps, and the result in this area is very, very massive poverty. And many live in work camps, and if they're fortunate enough to not to live in the work camps, they still usually do work in the fields because that's the work that's available. And so you'll see them at 6 in the morning lining up on the side of the highway waiting for buses to come and take them to work 10 or 12 hours in the field. And we are so blessed to be able to see that these small communities in this region are also being affected by the heart of God. This is a dream team, people. This is a team of hope right there. And this is what God showed us. God is sending people to these small communities. That's Chad with the pastor of the church there and the 2 missionaries that we met in Kamloops. They are people that are on the ground, and God is sending them to these poor communities, and they are bringing hope, and they are working with the children there. And this year, I feel just such a massive, I guess, relief in a sense, because I see God is doing a work in these communities. And what I thought was hopeless is not hopeless. Like, God is bringing people to love the children and make a change. What a blessing it has been to see just a little of what God is doing to bring change into this region. Change is coming through these neglected children. God is sending people to love them and teach them and work with them and provide for them a better future. We are so privileged to be able to help with the initial stages of Chad's dream with God, and I'm excited to see what that's going to become in the years to come. God bless you, Chad and Nicole Furlong, for hearing the call, for going and seeing the need, for letting God give you a dream, and then being willing to partner with God to be the change. God bless you, Daniel and Perla, the 2 missionaries that we met, for hearing the call, going and seeing the need, for letting God give you a dream, and then being willing to partner with God to be the change. Okay, so we're inspired, encouraged. How does that transfer back home? How does that transfer back home with our team? One of the things we really wanted to come back with this year is the idea that God wants to partner with us here. He wants us to partner with him in what he wants to do in Brandon. Pastor Nikki challenged each one on the team to recognize how God made them individually and think of ways that God can use your unique talents and giftings to serve the Lord right here. One person from our team said they had a dream to see Christian students meeting together at high schools, at the different high schools, just to encourage each other, to have a healthy environment to invite friends into. Another said that they believed it was that if we are the body we as the body simply loved without an agenda, it would open so many doors, and we would be able to see change right here in Brandon. Examples like taking the time to actually get to know new people, both inside and outside the church body, feeding the hungry, without the explicit point to evangelize them. Clothe the cold. We live in a cold climate, and there's kids in the wintertime that don't even have mitts in our city. People can sense our genuineness, again, if we actually make it a point to love people the way that we are called to live the life that we are called to. People would actually naturally be drawn to us. They would inquire then why we're doing what we're doing, and this would be our opportunity to share our faith with them. Church, thank you so much for supporting this trip. Thank you for praying and giving financially with your gifts. You are part of this trip. The missions trip was not just about the people who loaded the vans and drove for countless hours. It was something that our church got behind and chose to do together. And God has something for every one of us as a result of this trip. I don't know where you are right now in your lives, and I don't know what you're going through, but I know as long as we have breath in our lungs that we have been called to make a difference. And God wants us to partner with him every day. He wants us to bring change into our world here in Brandon and the surrounding areas. I love how God is constantly calling people to new areas of serving him. There are many from our congregation that are involved in serving as missionaries right now. Evelyn is in Africa again. And there are people from our congregation that are being called out to do missions work continually. There's many of the young people in our congregation that are out serving full-time in missions right now, and we're just so thankful for that. We are all called to be missionaries. The definition of a missionary is this: a missionary is someone sent by Jesus Christ, just as he was sent by God. The source of our inspiration and our service for God is behind us, not ahead of us. It is the Lord Jesus himself. The goal is to be true to him, to carry out his plans. That was written by Oswald Chambers. I think that's really good. We go in love because we are loved. We are loved first. Jesus said, as the Father has sent me, I send you also. Go and make disciples of all nations. So please close with me in prayer this morning. God, help us to hear the call that you place on each one of our hearts. It will never be the same as the person sitting beside us, and that's okay, but you have a call for each one of us. Lord, I ask that each one of us today would hear your call, that we would be willing to see the need. Help us, God, to dream big dreams with you. You're the God of the impossible, and you do impossible things, and you want us to be a part of those things. God, help us to be courageous and partner with you, to be the change that is needed in and around Brandon, where you have put us, and to the utmost parts of the globe. We thank you, God, for your ability in us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.